Next week, Premier Doug Ford decides whether or not to pull provincial funding from supervised injection sites across the province. There's one right down the street from campus, or rather on the same street at the corner of Victoria and Dundas. Our editor, Nicole, looked into how service users and city officials are feeling about the sites and the potential reallocation of funds.
And Mr. Ford, you're up first.
Well, my friend, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to have injection sites in neighborhoods. I've talked to numerous people that family members have had addictions, and they're telling me they don't want an area that they can do more drugs.
At the corner of Victoria and Dundas, there's usually a crowd of people outside the Toronto Public Health Building. It's where you'll find the Works, one of the city's supervised injection sites. For the past few years in Ontario, opioid overdoses have been one of the province's most deadly public health issues. In the year between August 2017 and August 2018, paramedics received 695 calls about suspected opioid overdoses. And that's just the number from the neighborhood around Ryerson, Church Street, Yonge Street, Moss Park. Across the city, there were hundreds more. So from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., people who use drugs can use them under supervision. They can use them in a place where if something goes wrong, there are medical professionals and volunteers on site to look after them. And because people can get clean needles there for free, the spread of HIV and Hep C is less likely too. Some of the city's safe injection sites have found permanent homes, but for other sites, funding from the provincial government runs out on September 30th. At that point, it's up to Premier Doug Ford to decide whether the province will continue to give them funding. These sites opened in the first place because of special permissions given to the province by the federal government. For 6 months, the province was essentially allowed to do what it had to do to intercede in a quickly mounting death toll. 303 Torontonians in 2017 alone died by overdose. That's a 63% jump from the year before. And standing outside the Works on Victoria Street, it's hard to imagine these sites aren't needed anymore. It's where I met Kimberly Monk, who said her mother goes to the Works.
Yes, my mother. She's overdosed a couple times here, but she's all right now.
Kimberly told me she thinks the supervised injection sites save lives, and that she'd way rather her mother use on site there than anywhere else. She said that she believes safe injection sites keep people safe. The chair of the Board of Health, that's the board that governs Toronto Public Health, agrees with Kimberly. His name is Joe Mahavik. He's a city councillor too, and he had a big role in opening the supervised injection sites in 2017. He's concerned that Premier Ford doesn't understand what's at stake here.
Now, he has said beforehand that he really wants to focus on support so that people get off of drugs, rehabilitation in particular. And that's great. But, you got to keep the person alive long enough to get them in that direction.
And while we haven't heard exactly what advice Ontario's health minister gave to Premier Ford on what to do with the injection sites, Councillor Mahavik says there's little dispute within the medical community that safe injection sites prevent deaths. He says the overwhelming response supports a harm reduction approach to helping people who use drugs. The supervised prevention sites are one of those harm reduction methods.
A harm reduction approach to drug use does take some thinking through, especially if you've been schooled in a more policing approach to drugs. So if you see someone in a laneway, historically, the instinct was to say, let's phone the police. Now we're evolving in the direction of saying, no, let's make sure that the person is taken care of, and let's call a healthcare professional so that they can attend to that person in a more helpful manner.
People in Toronto may have a better picture than they think of what happens if safe injection sites lose their funding. The very first site in Moss Park a few years ago was started by the community. The feeling then was that city officials were moving too slowly, that they were too disconnected from what was happening on the ground, and that people were dying while they were making decisions behind closed doors. And the death toll was rising fast, so up went makeshift camps.
There is a community of caregivers that includes doctors, nurses, social workers, healthcare professionals that are really committed to the drug-using community and preserving their lives. So what I suspect you're going to see, frankly, is a more confrontational approach, an in-your-face, well, you're not going to allow it, we're going to continue it, and we're going to continue it here. If you want to shut us down, then shut us down, but we'll be ready. And then you'll have all that conflict that really is totally unnecessary.
And Kimberly, who you met before at the works, she's not about to let safe injection sites slip through her fingers either.
I'd rather an injection site, way better.
You think they keep people safe?
Yes.
What would you do if the one that was closest to you ended up closing?
I would try and make my own new one.
This story was produced by Nicole Edwards with help from Brian Moore.